Okay, so yeah, to my poem. So my poem was written by Josef Roth. Josef Roth was an Austrian author, but actually he grew up in what's now Hungary, but it was once one empire, the Hungarian Austrian Empire. So he was considered Austrian. He was an Austrian author, and there's even one street called Josef Roth Straße in Vienna. So one street was named after him, and there is even a monument for him by that was built by a famous bank in Austria, Bank Austria.
Nico, why
And
are you
so he,
laughing right now?
I'm not laughing. I'm okay.
so Josef Roth is a big deal, and he actually died in 1939 before the Second World War in Paris. So he's also kind of a lot of actually Austrian authors kind of end up in Paris. Don't ask me why.
I'm
Nobody
sorry about that.
No, but wasn't
knows.
but Paris was considered like the center of like artistic culture at a certain point. So that makes sense.
I don't want to say that.
I
No.
probably just broke your heart, right? But you know.
No, just kidding. Paris was considered a big center of culture, and I think it still is.
It seems like it pained him to say that, Nico.
At the moment, it's not very a place
No.
of culture. It's just a place of
Lockdown.
of lockdown and subway malfunctioning. But one day it's gonna come alive again. But
I'm
tell me,
sure.
just to
No.
do a bad joke about the author. So I guess he's not Hungary anymore.
No, he isn't. No.
Okay, got it.
No.
No, I said my joke.
That's
No,
what
you
you were
understand.
laughing about in your head the whole time, wasn't it? I
Yeah.
could see you were laughing. I knew it.
Yeah, this is my first really bad pun in English. So I'm happy about that. Okay, tell me, we want to
was
hear
very
it
good.
now.
Okay, so the poem is called Lied der ungeborenen Kinder, and translated it means the song of the unborn children.
Of course.
And I'm just gonna start out, and then I'm gonna. It's hard not to laugh, not because of the poem, but because of your comments. So I'm gonna start, and then I will tell you more about the poem. Lied der ungeborenen Kinder. Wir sind nur ein leises, zartes Wehen. Ihr könnt uns nicht sehen. Wir sind nur Gedanken und leichter als Hauch, aber wir leben auch. Wir sind nie gewesen, wir durften nicht sein. Nur Wünsche sind wir, nicht Fleisch und nicht Bein. Euer innigsten Träume waren wir mal und jetzt eure Qual. Wir schweben um euch aus leichter Duft. Ihr greift nach uns und greift die Luft. Wir sind gar nicht da und ihr könnt uns nicht fassen. Ihr müsst uns hassen. Nur in manchen Träumen fangt ihr uns ein. Dann liegen wir an euren Herzen. Und träumen lächelt ihr das Schmerzen und denkt nicht der Qualen, die wir euch gemacht, bis ihr erwacht. Good, so that was the poem.
It's not
Thank you
weird.
so much.
It's sad.
No, it is sad. Yeah, it is sad. So Josef Roth kind of lived through the First World War, and many of his stories and poems actually they deal with pain, and I would say that it's called ungeborene Kinder, the unborn children, because people knew when women were pregnant and when kind of they were expecting children, of course, that they will be in a lot of pain because, of course, there was a famine going on after the First World War and even after the Second one, but especially after the First World War. And many people knew that many children will not make it and they will have to suffer, and maybe the parents will have to suffer because they will have to provide food. So it's about all this kind of this pain that people knew that they will have to go through when they kind of when they kind of get children, of course. Yeah.
And now we have the cultural shock.
Shock.
Okay, today we're going to talk about playing hooky.
Playing hooky.
What is playing hooky, Kimberly?
Playing hooky is like skipping school.
Oh, I never did that.
Or like you could also use it as like I'm gonna play hooky from my responsibilities, but it's a great turn of phrase in English. Playing hooky.
Okay. Hmm.
Oh
And
no.
this is what I wanted to talk about. Is it a common thing to skip class at the university, in college or university in the US? Because in France, it definitely is a very common thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, what are your experiences so far? Like like I said, at one point I think I've said I graduated college in 2010, so that's like 10 years ago. And the really like I didn't want to skip class. That wasn't like my purpose, but I often skipped class because I needed to do something else for another class, not because
Sure.
I just wanted to have fun. So in my university years, I took 18 credits every semester, and I graduated the university in 3.5 years instead of 4. Um, and I worked my butt off. So like what often would happen was, so like during part of my university, because I studied to be a teacher, so I had clinicals every day of the week. So like Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I had to drive 45 minutes to another high school to give German lessons. And then Tuesdays and Thursdays, I gave German lessons at an elementary school. And then I had to prepare all of these lessons, and I sometimes would skip other classes to do that. Unfortunately, the class I skipped probably the most was pop music, but
Oh, I'm so disappointed at that. Okay. What about you, Tom? Is it a common thing to skip class at gymnasium or colleges or?
So when you're in gymnasium, which would be the equivalent of a high school, it's not, of course, common. You're not allowed to. Students do it when they hit puberty, especially, with 14, 15, 16, of course. I don't think I ever skipped school without my parents' permission. Yes, Kimberly, do you want to say something?
I was just gonna put it back on you. Sure, that's what you're saying. In case any of your students ever watch this,
Yeah, I was a good student.
I believe you.
and but university is the different thing because there are lectures where you don't where attendance is not mandatory. There are seminars and kind of courses where you have to be present and you're only allowed to miss 2 classes. um yeah, so university, I would say lectures that you don't have to visit or where there is no mandatory attendance, students skip them. They just kind of study for the exam with some kind of learning material they get from a colleague or they find on the internet, and that's it. But there are a lot of things you actually have to attend as well. And when you skip those too many times, you're a failure automatically. Yeah.
How about you, Nico? What is the situation like at France in France? And I'd love to hear about your experiences at St. Thomas with that, both of you.
Okay. So in France, it's a very common thing, like all levels. Basically, the thing is that the first week of class is normal. You still have amphitheaters that are kind of full, but past the second week, it starts to be really less crowded. And sometimes you end up being almost the only ones in class. That happened to me. And the worst thing that happened to me is to be the only one attending an English class when I was at the university in my hometown. And for several sessions, it was only me and the teacher. And we were something like 30 persons in the beginning of the year. And it ended up being just a kind of individual one-to-one thing, and it was not supposed to be that at all. And in the end, so what could you guess from this situation? What's the next step? Like maybe the last students leave or something like that. I didn't leave. The teacher left.
Oh
I was the
my
only one
God,
remaining.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
But you're maybe the best student in history.
No, I
Yeah,
don't
that's
think I
crazy.
am. But the thing is that especially English classes are so overlooked in higher studies in France. Once you're not forced to do that anymore, usually you just drop. And this is
Wow.
what I didn't do because
It's
I
so
wanted to keep
surprising.
English. And yeah, it's really surprising because it's so useful. But some people actually just tend to specialize themselves from the second or third year of university. So they kind of like, yeah, I don't need that anymore. And that's why English is sometimes perceived as a drag or something you have to do when they take it, is that they have to do it. And to just catch up with what Kimberly asked as well, this is also my feeling of some classes at St. Thomas. I feel like some students actually took some language classes, maybe sometimes by default or because they had to, and it can play on the motivations of students and everything. But nevertheless, I didn't see a lot of missing people in class in St. Thomas. I think most of the time it was like full classes. I mean, in the classes I was teaching and attending, a few persons were missing, but it's no more than 2 or 3 persons per class, and it's really awesome compared to what's going on in France. But as I was telling to Kimberly as well, the other day we had a conversation. I was telling that the huge difference is also the price of the studies in France and in the US. I mean, when you pay so much for a degree, you don't want to miss the class. That's the thing as well. In France, everything is free, almost free. So
yeah, that's super interesting. So when I was at the university, I lived in the dorms, and in the dorms, my prepositions today, they had these posters hanging on the wall, and it said, like, every time you skip class, you were wasting $50.
Yeah. Whoa.
Wow.
Yeah. Great. So we learned an English term for skipping class, like playing hooky. What about in your languages? Do you have like a saying around that, or term, special term for it?
Okay, let's hear yours, Tommy.
So you would say in German, say schwänzen, Schule schwänzen, would be playing hooky or skipping school. But there are actually 2 or 3 terms, I would say informal terms, that are used, but I can't think of them now.
Well,
Because,
I've heard of like blau machen as one of them too, but
yeah, blau machen is one as well. Yeah, it's good to have a German teacher.
And literally, what does it mean literally? How would you translate it?
blau machen is to make blue.
Okay, to make blue. Okay,
like the
that's
color.
amazing. Okay. And
yeah, that's about it. But there are 2 or 3. There are more things, but I was a good student. I don't know these things.
Of course.
None of your friends ever taught you them.
And so I'm going to tell you the French term. So you have 2 possibilities. The most common is to say sécher. It's a verb. It means to dry, literally. Sécher, je sèche le cours. I just skip class. This is the most common term. And another vintage term that I like would be faire l'école buissonnière, okay? Which would literally mean to do the school around the bush. So it means like, the bush is buisson, and it just literally means like to go in the bushes and instead of going
like to hide, kind of, yeah.
Yeah, l'école buissonnière, so that's an adjective from bush. So
cool.
Yeah.
It's interesting that all these languages have kind of different ways to kind of refer to skipping school. That's actually amazing.
It's one of those, like, I was just thinking about our podcast, and I was actually just thinking about how much our cultures have in common. I know we have differences, but like, yeah, this is another sense where it's like, this is maybe the common tendency of humankind to shirk our responsibilities every once in a while.
Yeah. It was really interesting. I'm looking at the chrono now, and we have to unfortunately switch to the next section, and which is the last section of the day. Utsab, our friend, just sent us a track of the week he wants to share prior to his visit next week, hopefully, and we're gonna play it now. So thank you very much for coming and for listening. It was a great episode. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the song is called Majhe tobo dekha, and it's by an artist called Arnob.
Amazing.
Choúkrüt.
Can't wait to hear it. Choúkrüt.
Choúkrüt.